هسه نحن بنعلن اليوم اللي حنطلع فيه، بنكتب معه عبارات ثورية عشان نحمس الناس، لأنه الناس يعني في انقطاع الإنترنت ما بيكونوا عارفين الأخبار وكده، فعشان نطمن الناس إنه لسه إنه الشارع لسه صاحي، وإنه لسه في ناس قاعد تطلع، ولسه ناس قاعد تطالب بحقوقها وتطالب بالدولة المدنية.
3 weeks ago, military generals in Sudan shut down the internet, arrested civilian leaders, and put the country's prime minister under house arrest, taking over the government and sending tens of thousands of people into the streets in protest. The crackdown was swift and brutal. So far, at least 39 people have been killed. Sudan had been ruled by a transitional government, a council run jointly by the military and civilians. Its leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, was due to step down as head of that council. But instead, he staged a coup. Many now fear the country will backslide into authoritarian rule and total impunity, something the 2019 revolution, which ousted Africa's longest ruling dictator, Omar al-Bashir, was supposed to end. The price Sudanese people have already paid for Bashir's ouster and a transition to democracy is massive. Over the course of 18 months, 240 people were killed and thousands were injured at the hands of Sudanese military, police, and a notoriously brutal paramilitary unit, the Rapid Support Forces. Demands for accountability and justice for those responsible for the deaths of civilian protesters are unfulfilled.
أنا عايزة أقص على 4. أنت عايزة واحدة تكون طويلة كده، نقص ده على 2. صح؟ أنت أنا خطشة يلا يعني والله هكتب. أنا بدايتي مع الحراك من ديسمبر 2018. دي البداية كانت.
Were you in the streets on the day that al-Bashir fell?
أيوة نعم، كنت في الشارع. والله كان إحساس جميل جدا. إحنا قعدنا نبكي وكنا كنا فرحانين شديد إنه نحن بعد ال4 شهور اللي إحنا كنا فيها في الشارع رغم الضغوطات وكده، يعني زي الزول اللي كان في سجن وطلعوه من السجن. إحنا كان إحساس ما بيتوصف يعني.
But toppling al-Bashir came at a cost for Shema and many others. When security forces attacked the peaceful sit-in on June 3rd, 2019, more than 100 people were killed, including one of her closest friends.
ده كشة.
That's Kisha.
كشة. دي كشة كان في الاعتصام.
How old was he?
27 سنة.
Could you ever imagine that things would end as violently as they did?
يعني دي كانت حاجة متوقعة إنه الاعتصام يتفضى في أي وقت. كنا بنسمع أخبار زي دي، يعني من بعيد بنسمع أخبار زي دي، يقول لنا خلوا عملوا حسابكم كده، لكن بالطريقة الوحشية إنه يحرقوا الخيام، يدعوا الناس في البحر، ما كنا متوقعين حاجة زي دي يعني.
At the highest level, who do you blame for the deaths of over 100 people? Who do you think ordered the dispersal of the Sudan?
نحمل المسؤولية دي كلها للمجلس العسكري. واللجنة الأمنية اللي هي كانت لجنة البشير ذاتها، اللجنة الأمنية اللي كانت في الاعتصام كانت اللجنة بتاعت البشير ذاتها يعني.
Many say that the generals, including Burhan's number 2, General Hameti, seized power out of fear that if civilians took over, military leaders would finally be held accountable for unchecked atrocities dating back to the Darfur genocide up to the massacre of June 3rd, 2019. But that fear hasn't stopped them from unleashing the same brutal violence on civilians today. So this is one of dozens of protests that are taking place across Khartoum today, and thousands of people still came out despite the fact that they were met with a huge crackdown by military and police. We just got here on one of the first flights since the airport opened. They took all of our camera gear at the airport, so we're filming on our phones. They're not letting people gather in the central part of the city at all. They've closed down all the bridges, but still people have come out to protest by the thousands. Moments after we arrived at a peaceful protest, we witnessed truckloads of security forces firing tear gas and live rounds on protesters and onlookers for 2 hours straight. Then they conducted neighborhood raids that lasted well into the night. In the face of this excessive use of force, neighborhood resistance committees operate in secrecy and are the backbone of the current protest movement. They rarely give access to media in order to protect their anonymity and their plans for future action. So we're just driving up to a safe house in Khartoum, and we've been waiting for a few hours to get the call from one of the heads of a neighborhood organizing committee here. Tonight they're trying to organize for people to go out and start barricading the streets ahead of a planned day of civil disobedience tomorrow. What's the point of the barricading? What message are you trying to send, and who do you think it's affecting?
احنا رافضين البرهان انه هو يستلم السلطة، رافضين النظام الشمولي، رافضين النظام العسكري، ومطلبنا واحد تسليمها لحكومة مدنية فيو.
قاعدين نقفل الشوارع بالطوب، قاعدين نحرق لساتك، الزول من بعيد بيكون شايف الدخان طالع، عارف انه الشارع داك مقفول باليستيك محروق.
And do you think the barricading is sending a strong enough message?
تتريس الشوارع هو ما حاجة كفاية عشان توصل صوت الناس أو غضب الناس من اللي بيحصل في السودان، لكن هو جزء بيعبر عننا.
There were a lot of different groups that were a big part of the revolution that now are more political. And then you hear about you guys, the resistance committees. Who do you think is really driving the push for change now?
هو عمل مشترك. إحنا مهما افترقنا أو بقى ما في زول فوق الثاني في فترات بنتجمع زي ما حصل في إسقاط البشير. أنا ما حكذب. إحنا أسي ما بنفس الوحدة والقوة بتاعت 2019 اللي هي ببساطة بس إسقاط البشير. في اختلافات حصلت لأنه ده شيء طبيعي. إحنا قاعدين نحاول نبني دولة كانت مقموعة.
Our interview was cut short because police began a wave of arrests and beatings of committee members in the neighborhood.
عليك الله اعتقلوا ناس وصحيح ضربوا خفاش ده ضربوين.
She's speaking to somebody who's outside now.
قالوا قبضوا ناس.
Some are arrested now.
And that's normal. Every time you guys go out, you know this will happen.
Breastfeed, they beat them, they shave their heads.
General Al-Burhan denies the obvious crackdown and insists the military grabbed power because the civilian side of the government failed to deliver on the promise of the revolution. The civilian side, which is mostly made up of former protest groups, widely reject this claim. After repeated requests, Al-Burhan's team refused an interview and referred us to retired General Fattah al-Rahman Muhuddin.
أصبحت البلاد على شفا الانهيار. الانفلات الأمني أصبح يزداد يوم بعد يوم بسبب غلاء المعيشة، بسبب عدم قدرة المواطن العادي لتلبية أبسط احتياجاته. هذا عرض البلاد لخطر كبير جدا.
Right, but don't you think that after 30 years of a dictatorship, deep corruption, a lot of issues with governance, that just giving the civilian side of things or this transitional council 2 years to sort it out and then saying you're not doing a good enough job, don't you think that's a little premature for the military to say it's going so badly that there's no other option but for them to take back power?
صحيح أن فترة 30 عام كان فيها كثير من الفساد، كان فيها كثير من الخلل، لكن فترة السنتين بعد بعد قيام ثورة ديسمبر المجيدة ظلت الأوضاع تتدهور. الأيام السابقة حدث كثير من التخريب بواسطة بعض العناصر، لكن الآن عادت الحياة إلى طبيعتها، ويحق لأي شخص أن يعبر سلميا دون تخريب. المعلومات التي اطلعت عليها أن الذين كانوا في شارع 60 غزفوا قوات الشرطة بالحجارة، فكان الرد في أن يتم تفريقهم بالبومبان.
But you're saying you're reviewing reports. I'm saying I was there on the street. It was entirely peaceful. They came and started with tear gas and very quickly progressed to live rounds. I was there sitting next to children, sitting next to women, hiding and shaking in fear because the security forces came and started firing upon peaceful protests.
إذا حدث هذا فهذا غير مقبول، هذا غير مقبول ما دامت المظاهرة سلمية والتظاهر سلمي، ومثل هذه التصرفات بالتأكيد القوات النظامية ستحقق فيها وستعاقب من اتخذ هذا الإجراء، لأن المظاهرات السلمية حق مشروع والتظاهر السلمي حق مشروع.
So you're guaranteeing that the security forces will investigate these incidents and the fact that over a dozen people have been killed since October 25th. But that was the same thing that the military said 3 years ago when peaceful protesters were killed at the sit-in. And this week we spoke to many of the families of those people who were killed. And they've said the investigations have not gone anywhere, that the military is failing to provide suspects, that the military itself is slowing down the process.
صحيح، يعني إجراءات فض الاعتصام لم تمضي بالشكل المطلوب. مجرد ما حدث فض الاعتصام القوات المسلحة شكلت لجنة تحقيق ورفعت إجراءاتها في أقل من شهر بماذا حدث ومن المدان في هذه الأحداث. لكن المكون المدني الشريك في السلطة رفض هذه الإجراءات.
On November 11th, al-Burhan appointed a new ruling council, with the RSF's General Hemeti remaining his number 2 and the civilian Prime Minister Hamdok still under house arrest. The leading protest body said the new council has, quote, no legitimacy and will be met only with contempt and resistance. When you see the military leaders still in power, do you feel that Kisha's death was worthwhile? Do you feel that it led to something?
لا، دي ما الحاجة طالعة من أجلها، حاجة مؤسفة شديد يعني. حتى كيشا كان في الاعتصام بيقول إنه شنو يعني عايزين الحكومة تكون مدنية، عايزين تكوين المجلس التشريعي، يعني أي حاجة هو كان